So, in a couple of days, The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, gets released. And I'm excited. There is a fantastic TikTok going around where someone singing as Kermit the Frog talks about how the Batman story has been told over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in different formats. Now, there is a lot to do with this character. It's complex, but the reason why I bring this up now is because the things that I'm hearing, the critical narrative that's being built for this, is pretty specific. Buzzwords, Riddlers like Zodiac, movie has vibes of Seven, but with all the gothic that you want out of Gotham, that it is dirty and grimy, and it's a Batman scrapping as a human being at the core of like a gritty real world take on this, even more real world than Nolan's Batman. So, honestly, I've wanted a gritty detective Batman for a long time, but I don't know how I'm going to feel. And I think maybe I might end up on the same page as the critics, which is that this is a very, very good, possibly even great movie, but not like a great game changer type of movie. Like, it is still in the realm of a successful comic book movie rather than something transcendent of the genre. I am totally ready for Robert Pattinson to just be Batman the whole time. I saw some complaints about, and some like a lot of praise for Robert Pattinson's Batman. The main complaint is that he, after 2 years as Batman, he's still not Bruce Wayne. Like, he's almost entirely Batman. Like, he doesn't put on a persona to be Bruce Wayne in the public eye. But I just really hope it's something unique. I've heard that you don't really feel the runtime of this. It's supposed to be 3 hours. Paul Dano is someone who I have been a fan of for way too long because, yeah, they're being very conservative. They're not really talking about John Turturro. And I'm wondering if he's going to play a small role now, but play a role later. But that's the only weird thing about the critical narrative around this. Everyone is talking about this movie as a standalone movie, which is a good thing. But it is the start of a trilogy, of its own trilogy. And I'm really curious to see how this functions, if there's like satisfaction in this story standing on its own, or if it's going to be intriguing or investing, to get into it further later. That's one of the things about Batman Begins, is you can already tell that they were passionate about telling how Batman came to be. Then they were passionate about exploring his dynamic with the Joker on a different level. It's more grounded and whatever it is in this movie. And then you can tell there were roadblocks to telling the story they wanted to tell, partially with the death of Heath Ledger. And they came up with a conclusion that does tie back to and wrap up themes that have been present through this whole thing. This does tell one story, but it was a rocky road where they were focusing on the individual movies one at a time. With this being a planned trilogy, and no one in the critical community talking about that, I'm a little concerned. But it's Batman. And Batman is always a fun ride. And I've heard so many good things about the action, about the Batmobile, about all sorts of things. So, I guess I will look forward to feeling the compulsion to listen to the soundtrack on repeat for the next several days after I finally see the movie tomorrow night.
Riddler's latest. It's all about the Waynes. If we don't stand up, no one will.
You got a lot of cats.
I have a thing about strays.
You're part of this too.
Hands up! Stay still!
How am I part of this? Oh, you're really not as smart as I thought you were.
I think they're going to be able to make Batman movies forever. Let me get a couple of things out of the way first. Robert Pattinson is a great Batman, and in fact, the way this explores Batman as the singular character, that this is a movie about Batman and not just like Batman as opposed to a specific villain. Even the villain in this movie is used to further define Batman. It's one of the best. I mean, it's got to be really one of the hardest drawn, etched in stone definitions of Batman that we've had. He has had a long legacy of movies. Okay, you've had you've had him introduced on screen in 89 with Michael Keaton's Batman, and that was a darker take on the character, but it was still something they wanted to do commercially, and they went a little edgier with it, with the Penguin and Catwoman, and then, kind of pulled the brakes a little bit and skewed back in favor of something more commercial friendly, but that wasn't originally the intent. Michael Keaton always wanted to do an installment, kind of like Batman Begins, that explored the nature of why his character became Batman. Like, you see his origin, but how do you get then from that little kid to being in a bat suit instead of being like just a bitter rich person, or I don't know, whatever. And then in Batman Forever, you have this Schumacher cut that I still would really like to see, where you find from deleted scenes that Batman essentially feels responsible for his parents' death, because he finds in this diary that his dad noted that they didn't really want to go out that night, but they had to go out because Bruce, was upset. And so he's sort of running from his responsibility, but also he's not responsible for certain things. And you see how that meshes. And it's a little more thoughtful, a little more artistic than what you get later on down the road. And then you have the Dark Knight trilogy, which really sets to a core a different take on what a superhero can be, and a grounded take on what a superhero can be. And there's a really powerful point where in the middle of that, you have Batman make a choice in the Dark Knight that one of the biggest ways that Batman can be a hero to his community is that they don't see him as a hero. They see him as a murderer and a villain. And then all of the Dark Knight Rises is about how, because Gotham's success is built on a lie, it can be broken and destroyed. This movie, I only have 3 minor issues with it. One of them is that the action is directed so well, packed, hits hard. The sound design is slapping you across the face as hard as some things are slapping this character around. But he should be dead. He should absolutely be dead. It breaks my suspension of disbelief a little bit when there's an explosion this close to a person's face and you don't even bother to put like ash on his face. It's just completely clean. He's dead. I mean, getting smacked and around and all this kind of stuff. They make a point to show that his outfit, it is bulletproof, but that doesn't mean that his joints aren't still human joints. It's not an Iron Man suit. So he's dead. Fully 100% believe that from the second that bomb goes off and he wakes in and this character wakes up in a police station, all that is a fever dream in his head because he's dead. But no, like, I get it. There's always going to be some supernatural stuff, and I love that there is. I wanted there to be hints at some things being believable. But my issue number 2 is the hospital scene with Alfred, where they make a choice, and it actually is more of an interesting thought exercise than a criticism, where you look at what they decide to say is the truth about Batman's parents, and how it can mean 2 different things if his parents were something that he thought they weren't, and yet he still continues to grow beyond that and decide who he's going to be in spite of that, or he learns that his parents are not, and there is an actual explanation for how they were betrayed. And so you still have this nature that Batman is who he is because of parentage, and how you can still have moral value and have these things. And it's just a little bit of a touchy kind of like how they handle it. I don't know. It felt odd to me. And the third only issue I had with this movie is basically them trying to balance tones. There are a lot of very thoughtful, provoking, serious ideas that are important to this character, but they're more hinted at than explored as they kind of revolve around this central story about Batman. I thought that the chemistry between Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson was strikingly more effective than I thought, mostly because of Robert Pattinson's ability to stay with keeping this a distinct character. He's still being kind of recognizable in the way that he's performed certain other things, but Batman is Batman and he plays Batman, and that works. There's something to Robert Pattinson, like other people are saying, his ability to act with just his eyes and his physicality and not talk so much. But there's something else, I think, in his ability to so much sensitivity and vulnerability while still being absolutely horrifying. But that horrific nature is underscored by the choices Matt Reeves makes, right? Like, he plays on this one scene from The Dark Knight Rises where Batman comes out of like a dark hall and people shooting gunfire, so there's him jumping forward like a horror villain. But here, like, literally even his car screams like a horror. Like, it's insane. And there is some artistry to his direction in particular that sticks out, because Matt Reeves knows when to have a close-up of something. Even just the idea of the reflection in a motorcycle's rearview mirror being unfocused into becoming focused. It's that level of control and artistry over everything, feeling gothic and almost timeless, but also modern and dated. And it's trying to balance so many different things, and it just works so well. Pattinson's suit is phenomenal. This thing that he has going on 100% has to be the gun theory, and I can't wait for them to bring it up at the right moment, but I think they're intentionally avoiding talking about his origin story in a certain way. Also, just shout out forever the full-on appreciation and use and commitment to the idea that Batman puts freaking makeup around his eyes when he wears his mask. I mean, that is not all leather touching his eyelids, and that's been that way forever, and they just admitted it, and that's great. In the same way that this movie kind of takes the idea that we all really want to see this detective story, Batman also wants to be this detective and be this Batman, and turns around and like sucker punches you with the consequences of that. It's like he is the sort of emo edgelord, but also like hurt like individual that people might joke that he is. But there are consequences to him being that. He's not cool because he's wearing eyeliner and edgy. He's traumatized, but it's actually trauma. It's not treated as like something cool about the character. Like, I don't know how to exactly put it into words, but anyways, it seems so much to be more about the vindication and rewards that Batman gets from being Batman. Like some people have said, it's almost like he's addicted to being this person. And they underscore that something that people have said before, that Batman is his true identity, to the point that they've set up something, again, only kind of hinted at rather than explored, that would be unique to any other Batman movie, which is the idea that the sequel could be an origin to Batman creating the persona of Bruce Wayne and trying to figure that out. And that it's really important for the world he inhabits for him to do that. So at its core, the big thing that I took away to this, why this matters more than just being entertaining, and how this adds to the mythology of Batman in a way that it makes a statement about our world and is relevant as an adaptation, is that Batman has always been someone who's privileged. Now, Batman always sort of sits in the center of light and dark, law and lawless, and just the opposing sides of two different issues, and he stands in the middle. He is not of the law. He is not lawless. He does not kill. He does not save criminals from the justice system and all that. And one of the biggest things is that he is privileged, but he also has suffered. And so he rides in this middle line, and he identifies as vengeance until he realizes the consequence of identifying as vengeance. It is because of his privilege that his message has spread into every shadow in the mind and heart of every criminal in Gotham. And that has consequence. What he does, because he is privileged, matters. And that is the different thing about this. This is a story about a superhero because they are able to buy a car, put on stuff, not have a job, spend their time being a nocturnal animal that drives around the city streets, taking on people and indulging in everything that they want to do with their time. It's not until he sees the consequences of his actions that he has to do something not a lot of superhero movies do, which is have an arc where their hero has to change who they are in order to grow as a person and be a hero in that way. So for example, Spider-Man from No Way Home, I don't mean to keep like touching on that movie, but like, he is a superhero because he can fight villains no one can fight. And he is a superhero because Spider-Man in general can sacrifice more with grace and as a hero than most people can. Superhero is not just about supernatural hero. Superhero is just about going beyond what a typical hero can sacrifice. You know, a hero can run into a burning building and save people. A superhero can run into a burning building at lightning speed and save everyone super fast. But a superhero can also run into a burning building and it not give them trauma. That is beyond human capability without being a flying caped person. You know, so in some senses, this touches on the reality of being a hero in a very grounded way. The big point really feels like Batman cannot just be vengeance. And that's something that has been dealt with before with Batman, but not in the sense that he has been diving so hard into being Batman that he's given something that everyone has been saying they want. I mean, literally the opening of the 90s Batman animated series is, I am vengeance, I am the knight, I am Batman. People want this inspired by Seven, inspired by Zodiac, gritty detective. And oh my gosh, I just the kicks, the enjoyment of just living in a fantasy of something like a contact lens so that you don't have to take any evidence away from the crime scene because you already have. Oh my gosh, friggin' genius. It's so simple, but it lets him live in that headspace where you see Batman being the greatest detective. Not the greatest detective, because he slams his way through this. It really is an unfolding mystery. And Christopher Nolan himself once said, I believe, that the makings of a great story, particularly a great noir story, is that you don't want to be hanging above a maze watching a character navigate their way through it, because that would be frustrating. You want to be in the maze with the characters as they make their turns and seeing why they make these choices, so when they make the wrong choice, it matters, and that is a story unfolding. You want to see them get to the end of the maze, but the value and entertainment in the story is watching them make wrong turns. And Paul Dano delivers this so well. Paul Dano, people are saying you can see shades of what he's done in other characters, but I think there's a bit of a subversion of that. If you go in expecting him to be the sort of like Paul Dano victim, you're not going to expect the screaming. Like, oh my gosh. So he's fantastic. And I think Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, I think people are underappreciating her a little bit, because everyone's saying that she works, that maybe she's not as good as Michelle Pfeiffer, this and that and the other. But I think people forget how hard it is sometimes to ride that line. I think the closest comparison here is Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. And as much as I love what Anne Hathaway did with the character, this is one who had to embody someone who grew up not at all like with a leg ahead, you know, as someone who has suffered at the hands of people who take advantage of people who are disadvantaged. And she has to play a role in Batman's life, and she has to be someone on her own where she is pushing Batman towards lines that he doesn't want to cross. And when she is willing to cross that line, there's this divide between them, and it leaves Robert Pattinson's Batman on one side of a wall, realizing that as much as he might want to, he can't follow her. And being able to pull that off at all is a big deal. So Jeffrey Wright as Gordon is absolutely spectacular. The idea that when he's in the field, there's so much a team works so well. The idea that the mayor comes in and teases to Bruce Wayne, you know, as a Wayne, you really could be doing more for this city. And you're supposed to think in your head, haha, she doesn't know she's Batman, but she has a point in the end that really is hammered so hard home by a beautiful bookend that started 2 years ago when everyone watched this trailer and he called himself Vengeance for the first time. Oh my gosh. This movie hits so hard, and it's so invigorating and rejuvenating in the idea of why does it matter to watch a story about people who are being heroes? It's because we all have conflict in our everyday lives, and this is just its own unique story looking at how a particular issue, a particular conflict, how would someone make the right choice when the right choice seems impossible? Increasingly impossible. And that's what superheroes are able to do. They're able to show you how close or far we are from a real world where we can make the right choices. And at least to me, that's an important part of it. So I am going to give a final rating in 3 parts. So the critical consensus, the critical success meter is, I'll actually say a 9 out of 10. Because I think maybe Catwoman's a little underappreciated, but mostly everybody's gotten everything pretty much nail on the head. People who are saying Pattinson's their favorite Batman, I think I'm in the same page. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go that way yet, but I think I might be ready to go that way. On a scale of entertainment, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think there are some things about this movie that over time, once you get familiar with it and the thrills are worn off, it's going to be a long procedural. But the performances are solid, and it's like a really great sort of like standalone point to make about somebody. But as far as a story told, like a matter meter, like does it matter? Is it entertaining? And does it matter? It matters like a 7 or 8 out of 10. Because we have an onslaught of superhero movies that never stop. And I think most recently it was the actor who was in Green Lantern who came out and said that actors need to start being more careful about the choices because we may be at that oversaturation point where we have too many superhero movies and it's just being made for the sake of the fact that they make money. And I do think that this was made to make money, but I can just see in it a point that has value. And it has a lot of value in a world where we are constantly facing choices and consequences based on privilege. That is an important story to tell right now, and Batman is absolutely the right character to tell it. So, there you go. 9 out of 10 agreeing with critics. Solid 8 out of 10 entertainment. Solid 7 out of 10, which is a really hard bar to lift up, as a story that has meaning and matters outside of just being entertaining.